All right, let's dive into arms trading today.
Sounds good.
We've got these new reports from SIPRI and the Stimson Center.
Yeah, the big players.
They're giving us all the details on global arms flows and, how countries are complying with the Arms Trade Treaty.
Right, the ATT.
And how conflicts are, impacting the industry.
Yeah, it's interesting how even with demand for weapons going up because of wars and tensions,
Right?
there's this weird paradox happen.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Okay, so
SIPRI's report says global military spending hit a record $2.4 trillion this year.
wow.
Which is a 7% jump
Huge.
from last year.
Yeah.
It's the biggest surge since the 2009 financial crisis.
Yeah, and every single region increased their spending for the first time since then.
Wow, so it's like everyone's
Yeah.
getting ready for something.
Yeah, getting a little uneasy and reaching for whatever they can find.
For the biggest stick.
The biggest stick, exactly.
But wait, if everyone wants more weapons, shouldn't arms companies be making a ton of money?
Well, that's where the paradox comes in.
Okay.
Even though countries want these weapons,
Right.
the revenue for the top 100 arms companies actually dropped by 3.5%.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
It's supply and demand. But on a global scale,
Okay.
arms companies just can't produce weapons fast enough to meet the demand.
So even though countries want them,
Yeah.
they're not getting them.
Yeah. Deliveries are lagging behind.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But speaking of, trying to keep things in check, let's talk about the Arms Trade Treaty.
Right, right.
The ATT.
It's been 10 years since it
Gotcha.
came into effect.
Yeah.
Trying to make the whole arms trade more transparent and responsible.
Right.
The Stimson Center, they looked into that in their report.
Yeah.
And it's a bit messy.
Really?
46% of the countries
Oh, wow.
that are supposed to report their arms imports and exports are either late or they've never turned anything in.
That's a failing grade.
Yeah, not inspiring confidence.
Not at all.
But there is some good news.
Okay.
Fewer countries are trying to,
Hide it.
hide those reports, this year.
Okay.
So at least we're getting a slightly clearer picture.
So more sunlight is good.
More sunlight is always good.
But let's get down to, who are the big players here
Okay, yeah.
in this arms bazaar?
Well, the U.S. is still the top dog.
Of course.
Their share of global arms exports jumped to 42%.
Wow, that's huge.
And while they're rising, Russia's seen a massive drop,
Yeah.
53%,
Wow.
due to sanctions and needing to,
Supply their own?
supply themselves.
What about the buyers?
The buyers between 2019 and 2023,
Yeah.
the top 5 were India, Saudi Arabia,
Okay.
Qatar, Ukraine,
Makes sense.
and Pakistan.
Okay.
And there's another shift.
What's that?
Europe's arms imports have gone up by 94%.
94%.
94%.
That's like going from window shopping to
Yeah, it's a good.
maxing out your credit card.
Yeah, regional conflicts like Ukraine
Yeah?
have a way of shaking things up.
And speaking of shaking things up,
Yeah.
I was digging through the Stimson Center report,
Oh, yeah.
and I got sucked into these individual country breakdowns.
Oh, yeah.
They're like little mini dramas.
They are. They're fascinating.
It's so easy to just get lost in the big numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But these little details.
bring it to life.
Yeah. For example,
Yeah.
the UK reported selling a single Chieftain main battle tank to the U.S.
A tank.
for public display and reenactment.
What?
For a reenactment.
Right.
That's a bit much.
It makes you wonder what they're trying to reenact.
I know, right.
And then you have Estonia.
Okay.
Their report is meticulous, listing every single weapon type,
Wow.
the exporting country, and the country of origin.
Wow. Very detailed.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're keeping track.
It's like they're playing a very serious game of Risk.
Exactly.
And it reminds you that these aren't just numbers.
Yeah.
These are real weapons moving around the world.
Real weapons with real stories.
Right. And speaking of fascinating details,
Uh-huh.
SIPRI's report highlights the role of these private military companies,
Yeah.
like the Wagner Group.
The Wagner Group, their influence in Africa had been growing.
Yeah.
But things changed this year after their little rebellion in Russia and then the death of their leader.
Like a spy thriller.
It is. It's crazy. It highlights how this arms trade is so intertwined with all these geopolitical threads.
It's never just about the weapons.
It's never just about the weapons.
Speaking of interconnectedness,
Yeah.
both reports bring up the impact of conflict and climate change on global food security.
Right.
It's crazy how we often think of these things as separate issues.
Yeah, totally.
But they're so connected.
Yeah. The consequences of the arms trade extend far beyond the battlefield.
So we've talked about record military spending, major players shifting their positions, and countries still struggling with transparency.
Right.
But what stands out to me are those detailed country reports.
Oh, yeah, me too.
The little details.
The little details.
Your stories behind the numbers.
It reminds us that these aren't just data points.
Yeah.
These are real-world events.
With real-world consequences.
With real-world consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of real-world consequences,
yeah,
what are some of the other reporting trends or practices that the Stimson Center's analysis highlighted about the Arms Trade Treaty? Anything that raised an eyebrow?
Well, one thing was this whole nil reporting thing.
Nil reporting?
Yeah, it's basically when a country says, hey, we didn't import or export any weapons this year.
Oh, okay. So what's the big deal with that?
It's all about transparency.
Okay.
Accurately reporting those nil transfers shows a country is like really committed to following the ATT's rules. Yeah. It also helps us get a more complete picture of the global arms flow.
So like every piece of the puzzle matters.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so our country's doing a good job with this.
Well, the data suggests there's room for improvement.
Okay.
Out of all the public reports, only 15 countries said they had nothing to report.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty small percentage.
Yeah.
So is this a case of them not understanding the rules or are they being sneaky?
Yeah, it's hard to say without digging deeper.
Right.
It could be a lack of awareness, maybe some bureaucratic hurdles, or maybe some countries are just, being sneaky. Right. The report doesn't really speculate on the reasons, but it highlights this as an area where we need more clarity.
Right. So sometimes the most important details are the ones that are missing.
Exactly.
Right.
A simple nil report can speak volumes.
Absolutely.
But speaking of details, the report also gets into this whole thing about national categories and definitions in reporting.
That sounds complicated.
It's a bit technical.
Okay.
But basically, the ATT lets countries use their own definitions for categorizing weapons.
Okay.
As long as they're not too far off from the UN's standard terms.
So kind of like allowing for dialects of the same language.
Exactly.
But why allow that flexibility?
Well, it's supposed to make it easier for countries with different legal systems.
Right.
And terminology, you know?
Okay, but it makes comparing data hard.
Yes. Yeah, it makes it tricky when you're trying to analyze all the data on a global scale.
Right, because you're trying to compare apples and oranges.
Exactly. You're trying to compare apples and oranges.
Okay.
And the report gives some examples of how this plays out, for instance.
Yeah.
Belgium decided to use a regional standard for one category.
Okay.
The European Common Military List, ML1.
Okay. So they're using what their neighbors are using.
Yeah, they're aligning with their neighbors.
Okay.
What about other countries? Are they all over the place with this?
Yeah, are they doing their own thing?
Oh, yeah. Japan.
Okay.
They categorize their small arms and light weapons, imports and exports, using the World Customs Organization categories.
So they're doing their own thing.
They're mixing and matching.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's quite a bit of variation.
It sounds like a recipe for confusion.
It can be.
Yeah.
Which is why the Stimson Center is saying that countries need to clearly explain their national systems.
Right. Context is key.
Context is key. Exactly.
Yeah. Because if you're trying to...
If you don't know how they're defining it...
Yeah. Understand the deal.
It's like a secret code without the key.
Right.
You need the key.
So they're providing the framework.
Yeah, they're providing the framework.
For understanding what the data means.
Exactly. But the Stimson Center report goes a step further.
Okay.
And it compares ATT reporting with another transparency mechanism.
Okay.
The UN Register of Conventional Arms.
Okay, so we've got two systems that are doing kind of the same thing.
Kind of the same thing, yeah.
So what did they find when they compared them?
Historically, the ATT Secretariat has been getting way more reports than UNROCA.
Okay.
But things seem to be changing.
Really?
In the past year, submissions to UNROCA have skyrocketed.
Really?
And for 2023 reports, UNROCA and the ATT are almost neck and neck.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Any theories on why UNROCA is suddenly so popular?
Well, the report suggests it could be the UN stepping up its game.
Okay.
You know, encouraging countries to report, making it easier.
So the UN's being more proactive.
More proactive, yeah.
Oh.
But there's another possibility.
What's that?
This increase might also be because countries are finding ways to report to both the ATT and UNROCA more efficiently.
So they're streamlining it.
Yeah, they're streamlining the paperwork.
So killing two birds with one stone.
Exactly. Two birds with one stone.
Is that actually a thing?
It is. There's a mechanism that lets countries basically say, hey, use my ATT report for young on RCA too.
Oh, wow. That's smart.
It saves everyone time and effort.
Yeah, that's efficient.
It is efficient.
Okay, so how many countries are doing that?
More and more are catching on. Oh. Over 60% of the countries that submitted public ATT reports in 2023 authorized their reports to be used by UN ROCA.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So that's good for transparency.
It's a positive development.
Yeah, anything that encourages more openness.
More openness is good.
Okay.
But let's talk about nuclear weapons.
Okay.
ACE-PRI's report paints a pretty sobering picture.
Yeah.
As of the start of 2024, 9 countries have their fingers on the button.
Right.
With about 12,500 nuclear weapons in total.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and of those, roughly 9,500 are ready to go.
Wow.
At a moment's notice.
That's scary.
With almost 4,000 actually deployed.
Wow.
With operational forces.
That's unsettling.
It is a bit unnerving.
Yeah, especially with everything going on in the world.
Right, and what's even more concerning is that while the total number of nuclear warheads is going down, that's mostly because the U.S. and Russia are getting rid of old ones.
Oh, okay.
So the number of active ready-to-launch warheads is staying the same or even going up.
So it's not just how many.
Yeah.
It's also like...
It's how powerful they are.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, both the U.S. and Russia are modernizing their arsenals.
So they're making them even more deadly?
Even more deadly. And then you've got China, who's not only modernizing, but expanding their arsenal, too.
And that's been causing some concern, right?
Yeah, for good reason.
Yeah.
Some experts predict that within the next decade, China could have as many intercontinental ballistic missiles as Russia or the U.S.
That's a game changer.
It's a game changer.
Yeah, and it's not just the big players, right?
Right. Every other nuclear-armed state is either developing or deploying new weapons, or they've publicly said they plan to.
So it's like nuclear arms race 2.0.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah.
And it makes the need for international cooperation and arms control even more urgent.
We need to pump the brakes on this thing.
We need to pump the brakes.
Before it gets out of control.
Exactly.
It's like those Cold War tensions never really went away.
They just morph.
They just change shape.
Yeah.
Into something new.
Into something new and possibly more dangerous.
Right. And trying to assess the true scope of the threat is like navigating a minefield.
It is.
Because the levels of transparency vary so much.
It varies wildly from country to country.
It's like some are playing poker with their cards face up, and others are keeping them close to their chest.
Perfect analogy.
So for countries like Israel and North Korea, we're just guessing.
We're just guessing based on how much fissile material they might have and what we can see from their missile tests.
So we're dealing with incomplete information.
Incomplete information.
And it makes assessing the threat.
It makes it much harder.
Really hard.
Yeah.
Because what we see is just the tip of the iceberg.
Just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. And this brings us to nuclear disarmament.
Yeah.
Arms control. And preventing the spread of these weapons.
It's been a long road.
It's been a bumpy road.
A bumpy road.
And the current climate isn't really helping.
No, it's not.
The war in Ukraine has thrown a wrench into international cooperation.
It has.
It's like everyone's back in their corner.
In their corners.
Eyeing each other suspiciously.
Exactly.
And Russia, they've talked about supporting arms control agreements.
Yeah.
But their actions.
Yeah, their actions tell a different story.
They tell a different story.
They've stepped back from agreements. Using Ukraine as an excuse.
And there have been some small positive steps.
Right.
In other areas, like between China and the U.S. But the overall trend is worrisome.
Yeah, the overall trend is worrisome.
It's like when relationships fray, everything else suffers.
Everything else suffers.
And one of the biggest setbacks has been Russia.
Right.
Suspending its participation in the New START treaty.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Remind me what that was all about.
Okay, so New START.
Yeah.
It came into effect in 2011.
Okay.
And it set limits on how many deployed strategic nuclear warheads both the U.S. and Russia could have.
So it was trying to get the two biggest players to reduce their arsenals.
Exactly.
Okay.
And for a while, it seemed to be working.
Okay.
But then things started to unravel when the U.S. accused Russia of not playing by the rules.
Okay.
Especially when it came to inspections. And Russia's response was basically to walk away.
So we're in uncharted territory.
Uncharted territory.
When it comes to U.S., Russia, nuclear arms control.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
So all that progress that was made can be undone just like that.
Just like that.
If the political will isn't there.
It's a fragile thing.
Yeah.
But while the U.S. and Russia dominate the headlines, there are other challenges.
Right.
We can't ignore Iran's nuclear program.
Right, Iran.
Yeah, they've been trying to revive the JCPOA.
JCPOA.
For a while now.
Yeah, that was a big deal when it was first signed.
It was.
But it's been hit with setback after setback.
Yeah, it's been rough.
Especially since the U.S. pulled out back in 2018.
Back in 2018.
And now Iran's involvement in Ukraine.
Yeah, supplying drones to Russia.
Yeah, that's further complicating things.
Complicating things, yeah.
So it's a tangled web of diplomacy and sanctions.
Yes.
Geopolitical maneuvering.
It is.
Yeah, and then we have North Korea.
North Korea, they're determined to go their own way.
They're a master class in defiance.
They are.
Yeah, they're just ignoring international pressure.
Ignoring it.
And their missile tests.
Yeah, they've ratcheted up tensions in the region and beyond.
So the threat of nuclear proliferation isn't limited to just the big players.
Any country with the resources and the will can join the club.
Which brings us to the NPT.
The NPT, right?
The Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons.
That's seen as the cornerstone of global efforts to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons.
Right.
But like any international agreement, it has its critics and challenges.
And what are some of those?
Well, one debate is that the 5 recognized nuclear weapons states under the treaty, China, France, Russia, the UK, and the US.
The big players.
The big players haven't really made much progress on disarmament.
So they're still holding on to their nukes.
They're holding on tight.
And the non-nuclear states are like, what's going on?
Yeah, they're like, hey, you guys promised to disarm.
So it's a standoff.
It is a standoff.
Yeah. And the war in Ukraine hasn't helped.
No, it's made things worse. It's harder to find common ground when trust is broken.
It's like progress on disarmament is hostage to...
It's hostage to the bigger picture.
The bigger geopolitical picture.
The bigger picture.
Yeah, and then we have the TPNW.
Right, the TPNW.
Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons.
That takes a much harder line.
So what's the difference?
It's all about eliminating nuclear weapons completely.
Okay.
No ifs, ands, or buts.
Okay.
It came into force in 2021.
Okay.
And while it has the support of many non-nuclear weapon states, none of the nuclear-armed countries have signed on.
So it's like a club with no members.
It is. It's a bit of a catch-22.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
If it gains traction.
Yeah, if it actually achieves anything.
Right.
Okay, so we've got different perspectives on how to tackle this nuclear threat.
Yes.
Some want incremental steps. Others want radical change.
Right. 2 different approaches.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about chemical, biological, and health security threats.
These are threats that can cause widespread harm.
Like COVID-19?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the report highlights how international cooperation has been hampered by certain states resorting to obstruction and disinformation.
It's like these tactics are becoming more and more common.
Yeah.
It's eroding trust and hindering progress.
It's like trying to build a house on quicksand.
Right.
But let's focus on some specifics.
Okay.
When it comes to chemical arms control, the OPCW, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, they've been leading the charge to eliminate these weapons.
Yeah, they do important work.
They do, investigating alleged use and promoting compliance with the Chemical Weapons Convention.
But haven't they run into some problems?
They have. Their efforts have been challenged, especially in Syria.
Syria, that's been such a tragic situation.
It has. There have been numerous allegations of chemical weapon use.
Right.
And the OPCW's investigations have faced resistance and attempts to discredit them.
Okay.
It's highly politicized, making it difficult to hold people accountable.
It's tragic.
It is.
When you have evidence of wrongdoing, but political agendas get in the way.
Get in the way of justice.
Yeah. It's a reminder that international justice can be slow and imperfect.
Very slow and imperfect.
But there have been some positive developments.
There have. The U.S. completed the destruction of its declared chemical weapons stockpile in 2023.
That's huge.
It's a major milestone.
Yeah.
The world is closer to eliminating these weapons.
That's definitely a reason for optimism.
It is.
Okay, but the challenges don't stop there.
Right. Right. Biological arms control gets even trickier.
In what way?
Unlike chemical weapons, there's no international body
Okay.
Like the OPCW. That's dedicated to biological weapons.
So who's in charge of making sure countries aren't developing them?
We have the Biological Weapons Convention.
Okay.
PWC.
Uh-huh.
But it doesn't have any strong verification mechanisms.
So it relies on countries being honest?
Yeah, it basically relies on the honor system.
The honor system, we know that doesn't always work.
It doesn't always work.
So has it been working?
Not really. The report points out
that
this system has been strained by accusations and disinformation.
Okay, who are the culprits here?
Particularly from Russia.
Russia again?
Yeah.
Okay, what have they been up to?
They've been throwing around accusations, claiming that other countries are violating the BWC without providing any real evidence.
So muddying the waters.
Muddying the waters, trying to shift blame.
Classic disinformation tactic.
Yeah, accuse others of what you're doing yourself.
Right, so this has created an atmosphere of distrust.
It has.
Making it harder to strengthen the treaty.
Yeah, it's hard to have a productive conversation when someone's shouting over you.
Yeah, it's a recipe for chaos.
Exactly.
Are there any glimmers of hope on the health security front?
Actually, there are.
Okay.
Remember the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, how could we forget?
It was a wake-up call.
Yeah.
For the world.
Right, showing us how vulnerable we are.
Showing us how vulnerable we are.
To infectious diseases.
Yeah, it's not just a national interest.
Yeah.
It's a shared responsibility.
Right.
And the report highlights some encouraging progress.
Okay, like what?
Like the containment of the Mpox outbreak.
Oh, yeah?
And the ongoing negotiations for a new pandemic treaty.
Oh, okay, so that's good.
Yeah, that's a positive step.
Yeah.
It shows that international collaboration is possible.
Even in a world with so much tension.
Even in a world with so much tension.
Yeah, it's a reminder that when we're faced with a common threat, we can sometimes
put aside our differences.
And work together.
For the greater good.
For the greater good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to arms control.
Okay.
And talk about inhumane weapons.
All right.
That's a topic that's unfortunately always relevant.
It is.
Yeah.
The international community has made progress.
Okay.
But there's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
The report focuses on the 1981 Certain Conventional Weapons Convention.
Okay. What is that?
The CCW.
The CCW.
It's the main framework for regulating these really nasty weapons.
Okay, give me some examples.
Weapons designed to cause excessive suffering or have indiscriminate effects. So landmines, cluster munitions, incendiary weapons.
Those are some awful weapons.
They are.
So has the CCW been effective?
It's been instrumental in setting rules and establishing norms. But progress has been held back by some countries.
Who are digging in their heels?
Yeah, resisting stricter regulations.
So countries that use these weapons...
Badly, yes.
And don't want to give them up.
Yeah. And the report highlights how the wars in Gaza and Ukraine have shown the human cost of these weapons.
Tragic.
It is. The civilian casualties are horrific.
Yeah, and the long-term damage to communities.
Immeasurable.
And even though we have these treaties...
Right.
Like the Convention on Cluster Munitions and the Mine Ban Treaty...
Yeah.
They're still being used.
They're still being used.
It's a reminder that treaties are only as good
as
the countries that follow them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the report also digs into EWIPA.
EWAPA.
Yeah, explosive weapons in populated areas.
Why is that such a big concern?
Well, urban warfare is becoming more common. Right. And using explosive weapons in densely populated areas poses a huge risk to civilians.
Even if they're trying to target military objectives.
Even if they're being precise. The blast effects and debris can cause...
a lot of damage.
Widespread damage.
Yeah.
And casualties.
Like performing surgery with a sledgehammer. You can't avoid the collateral damage.
You can't avoid it.
So what's being done about this?
Well, there's no specific treaty banning AWIPA.
Okay.
But there's growing international pressure.
Okay.
And in 2022, a political declaration on AWIPA was adopted.
Okay, what does that do?
It outlined commitments to try to minimize civilian harm.
So it's a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction.
But we need to see action.
We need to see action.
Not just words.
Exactly.
Okay.
It takes time to change behavior and establish new norms.
Right. And it takes pressure from the international community.
It does.
Okay, so let's talk about conventionally armed missiles.
Okay.
And drones.
Drones, yeah.
They become so common in modern warfare.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, but who's responsible when a drone strike goes wrong?
Right. And what about indiscriminate use?
Right. Those are some big questions.
They are big questions.
Yeah.
And here's the thing.
What?
They're largely unregulated. There are no specific treaties governing their use.
So we're playing catch-up.
We are playing catch-up.
With technology.
We're trying to create rules for something that's already out there.
It's like giving someone a powerful tool.
Yeah.
With no instructions.
No instructions, no safety guidelines.
It's dangerous.
It is dangerous.
But while we're lagging behind on some things, are there any bright spots?
There are.
Okay.
The report highlights the establishment of something called the Global Framework for Through-Life Conventional Ammunition Management.
That's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
Can you break that down?
Basically, it's a set of guidelines and best practices for managing ammunition stockpiles throughout their whole life cycle.
So from production?
From production to disposal.
Okay, so it's not just about the weapons.
Yeah.
It's about the ammunition.
It's about the ammunition, too.
Okay.
It's about preventing it from going to the black market.
Okay.
Reducing accidents.
Yeah.
And responsible disposal.
So it's good housekeeping.
It's good housekeeping.
For ammunition.
Exactly.
So responsible arms control isn't just about regulating the battlefield.
Right.
It's about preventing harm, even when ammunition isn't being used.
It's a more holistic approach.
Yeah, recognizing the ripple effect.
The ripple effect.
Of the arms trade.
Exactly.
Okay, but are there any concerning trends?
There are. The report highlights the collapse of Europe's conventional arms control regime.
You're talking about the CFE treaty?
The CFE treaty, yeah.
Okay.
The Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe, signed in 1990, it limited conventional forces in Europe after the Cold War.
So a key part of that post-Cold War piece.
Yeah, a key part.
What happened?
Tensions between Russia and the West started to rise in the early 2000s, and the treaty became a casualty.
And then Russia withdrew from the treaty.
They withdrew in 2023, and that, combined with the war in Ukraine, has effectively killed the CFE regime.
It's a major setback for arms control in Europe.
It is.
And it's a reminder that even the best intentions can fall apart.
When things get bad.
When geopolitics gets in the way.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like the foundation of trust.
The foundation of trust is shaken.
Is broken.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a reminder that peace and stability take constant effort.
Constant effort, dialogue, and compromise.
And when those are missing,
things can unravel quickly.
Things unravel quickly.
They do.
Okay, let's talk about emerging technologies.
Emerging technologies, that's where technology is advancing faster than norms and regulation.
Right. It's like the Wild West.
We're always playing catch-up.
We're always playing catch-up.
Trying to understand these technologies before they're misused.
Before they're misused, exactly.
And the report focuses on three main areas.
Three priority areas.
AI, cyberspace, and outer space.
Yeah, those are the big ones.
The lines are blurring.
The lines are blurring between peace and...
And equipment. Things that can be used to build a hospital or a bomb, depending on who's got their hands on them.
Right, a double-edged sword.
Exactly. And controlling the trade in these items is really important to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, the report talks about strengthening controls, both globally and regionally.
So making sure those dual-use items don't end up fueling conflicts or human rights abuses.
Exactly. And one of the key tools for this is the Arms Trade Treaty, the ATT.
Right, the ATT, regulating the international arms trade.
Yeah, it sets standards for arms transfers and requires countries to assess the risks before approving them.
So kind of like a background check for weapons, making sure they're not going to be used for bad things.
Exactly. But the ATT faces challenges.
What kind of challenges?
Well, the report mentions financial struggles and a decline in reporting.
And we've talked about how important transparency is. If countries aren't reporting accurately, we can't know if the treaty is working.
Exactly. And the war in Ukraine has made things even more complicated.
With all the sanctions and embargoes.
Right. It's a patchwork that can be difficult to enforce.
It shows how international law depends on countries actually following the rules.
Very true. But in addition to the ATT, the report also discusses multilateral arms embargoes.
Arms embargoes, those are basically bans on selling weapons to certain countries, right?
Exactly. They're usually imposed by international organizations to prevent those weapons from fueling conflicts.
So it's like grounding a country for bad behavior.
You could say that. The report says there were 14 UN arms embargoes and 22 EU arms embargoes in effect in 2023.
But are they working?
That's the question. The report highlights the case of Libya as a troubling example.
What's happening in Libya?
Well, despite an arms embargo, weapons are still flowing into the country.
So countries are basically ignoring the embargo.
It seems that way. It shows how difficult it can be to enforce these embargoes, especially in complex situations.
Okay, what about export control regimes? I remember you mentioning those earlier.
Right. Those are groups of countries that agree to control the export of sensitive goods and technologies.
So like a club of responsible countries trying to keep dangerous stuff out of the wrong hands.
Exactly. The main ones are the Australia Group, the Missile Technology Control Regime, the Nuclear Suppliers Group, and the Wassenaar Arrangement.
They sound like important players in preventing the spread of dangerous weapons.
They are, but the report points out that their work has been impacted by the war in Ukraine.
How so?
Well, some of these regimes include Russia as a member.
Oh, right.
And that's created tension and made it difficult to make decisions.
It's another example of how global politics can get in the way of addressing shared threats.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot today. We've talked about record military spending, the complexities of arms control, and the challenges of emerging technologies.
It's been a really informative deep dive.
It's a complex issue, but it's one we need to pay attention to. The arms trade has real consequences for real people.
Every weapon sold, every bullet fired, it all has a human cost. We can't forget that.
Well said. And the arms trade is constantly changing, with new technologies, new players, and new geopolitical realities.
So we need to be adaptable and find new ways to address these challenges.
We do, because the stakes are too high to ignore.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, what are some key things you want our listeners to remember?
The arms trade is not just about numbers, it's about people. It's about lives lost, families torn apart, communities destroyed.
We can't lose sight of the human cost.
We can't. And the arms trade is constantly changing, so we need to stay informed and adapt our approaches.
We can't afford to be complacent.
And finally, arms control isn't just the responsibility of governments. It's a collective responsibility that involves civil society, the private sector, and individuals.
So we all need to be engaged, raise awareness, advocate for change, and hold our leaders accountable.
We can all play a part in creating a more peaceful world.
A world where weapons are silenced and resources are used to address the root causes of conflict.
A world where the arms trade is a force for good, not a threat to humanity.
That's a vision worth fighting for.
It is.
Thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the world of arms trading.
We hope you learned something new.
Stay curious, everyone.
And stay engaged.
Until next time.